Could you endure it? If, at a lavish gala celebrating your mother-in-law's anniversary with 200 guests in attendance, your husband's mistress was seated at the head table, smiling while you were sent to a corner of the kitchen to wash dishes with the words, "You can get to work." The poor thing was a wife. Now she's a dishwasher. The mistress's mocking voice, punctuated by the shattering of a plate, pierced my heart. My name is Ava Smith. For 5 years, I hid my true identity, pretending to be an orphan, alone in this world, just to be accepted into this family. The humiliation from my mother-in-law, the indifference from my father-in-law, and finally the betrayal of the husband whose love I believed in, I bore it all in silence. But they didn't know. They didn't know that I am Ava Thompson, the only daughter of Robert Thompson, the chairman of the board of the colossal holding company, Thompson Global, a man who moves the entire American economy. And they didn't know that a single phone call, made with a trembling hand on that humiliating night, would be the trigger that would destroy their sandcastle in a single night. This is the story of the astonishing revenge of a woman who endured 5 years of hell to reclaim her pride, her life, and herself. It is the story of the pathetic fate of nobodies who lost everything, social standing, fortune, and family, and were cast into the depths of despair. Please, see this story through to its truly satisfying conclusion. Shimmering crystal chandeliers bathed the grand ballroom in a soft, pearlescent glow. This was one of the most prestigious and fashionable hotels in the heart of New York City. The Plaza. Its imperial ballroom was the setting for the 50th wedding anniversary gala of my mother-in-law, Susan Smith. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you, our dear guests, for gathering in such numbers tonight for my wife, Susan, the confident, booming voice of my father-in-law, Paul Smith, echoed from the microphone, but I heard it as if from a great distance. I, Ava Smith, stood at the entrance to the ballroom, my back to the festivities. My duty was to bow to each arriving guest. Welcome. We're so glad to see you. Oh, Ava, you look lovely as always. I answered the compliments with a smile, but my heart was heavy, as if I had swallowed lead. The pale lavender silk dress, custom made for this evening, was my mother-in-law's favorite color. My hair was pulled back tightly in a bun, my makeup understated. The star of the show tonight was Susan. A daughter-in-law should be nothing more than a modest accessory. For 5 years of marriage, I had constantly repeated this to myself. Just get through tonight. I forcefully suppressed the dark feelings churning in my chest, hiding them behind a mask of a smile. Over 200 guests had already taken their seats, and the hall was filled with a lively hum when it happened. Click, clack. The distinct sound of high heels echoed, and the doors swung open. In the doorway stood a young woman in a Chanel tweed jacket, Veronica Malloy, my husband's subordinate and his mistress. My heart felt like it had been plunged into ice water. It froze solid. Why was she here? Our eyes met, but Veronica showed not the slightest hint of embarrassment. On the contrary, with her head held high as if she were the hostess of this evening, she walked straight toward me. In her hand, she carried a large, signature shopping bag from Bergdorf Goodman. The sweet, heavy scent of her perfume tickled my nostrils, the same scent I had recently caught faint whiffs of on my husband's shirts. Reality pierced my chest like a sharp knife. As she passed me, Veronica gave a barely perceptible smirk, lifting the corner of her lip. Then she strode decisively toward the head table, where today's guest of honor, my mother-in-law Susan, was seated. "Susan, congratulations! This is a small gift for you." Her voice, clear as a bell, rang through the hall. In the next second, I witnessed an unbelievable scene. My mother-in-law, who had always been stern with me and had never once offered a sincere smile, blossomed like a vibrant flower. "Veronica, darling, I'm so glad you could make it. We were waiting for you." Susan took Veronica by the hand and sat her down beside her, as if welcoming her own daughter. "I hope you like it, Susan. Oh, what a gorgeous Hermes scarf." "Thank you, Veronica. You are such a kind and thoughtful girl." I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scene. I bit my lips so hard I could taste blood. If I caused a scene now, I would ruin Susan's anniversary. I couldn't let that happen. All I could do was stand there, rooted to the spot. Finally, the main event of the evening began. My father-in-law's speech. Illuminated by a spotlight, he surveyed the room with a satisfied expression. His gaze lingered for a few seconds on Veronica, seated at the head table. And tonight, my dear friends, I want to make another important announcement. A slight murmur went through the hall. I want to introduce you to the woman who will soon become a part of our family. Our new family. What was he saying? For 5 years, I had been the daughter-in-law of this house, Veronica Malloy. Please, come up here. At Paul's invitation, Veronica rose gracefully and gave a low bow. In that instant, the hall erupted in applause. Whispers came from all around. Oh, Paul Smith's son is getting married again? What happened to his first wife? I don't know. But the new one is a real beauty. The ground was giving way beneath my feet. My very existence had been erased. In front of 200 guests, my husband's mistress was being introduced as the new daughter-in-law of this family. And my husband, David, sat right next to Veronica, smiling happily. My husband was smiling next to another woman. When dinner began, there was no seat for me at the table. No, that's not right. She was sitting in the place where I was supposed to be, as I stood there, bewildered. My mother-in-law's icy voice reached me. Ava. Yes, Susan? Go to the kitchen and help wash some dishes. They're short-staffed. Wash dishes? I repeated, not believing my ears. Here, at my mother-in-law's anniversary, in front of 200 guests, I, her daughter-in-law, was being ordered to wash dishes. But, Susan, is there a problem? Susan's voice grew slightly louder. Are you saying a daughter-in-law can't help out at her mother-in-law's party? The gazes of those around us pierced me like needles. I could resist no longer. I'll go. I turned and walked toward the kitchen. As I left, I heard Susan's voice behind me. And you, Veronica. Please eat. Don't be shy. We can't have you ruining those beautiful hands. In the kitchen sink, a mountain of dirty plates loomed like a monument to my despair. I rolled up my silk sleeves and plunged my hands into the cold water. Its biting chill mirrored the state of my soul. Just then, I heard the kitchen door creak open. Turning, I saw Veronica with a glass of champagne in her hand. Her cheeks were slightly flushed from the alcohol. Oh, Ava, what are you doing here? She looked down at me with an expression of feigned pity. Washing dishes? Ha! The poor thing was a wife. Now she's a dishwasher. Veronica took a step closer. The smell of champagne mixed with that same sweet perfume, paralyzing my thoughts. David is mine now. And this house, and his parents, they're all on my side. It's over for you. You understand? I gripped a plate in my hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. David told me. He said his love for you died a year ago. He only stayed with you because you stubbornly refused to grant a divorce. Poor David. Veronica giggled and took a sip of champagne. Then, looking me in the face, she delivered the final words. He's filing for divorce next week. And don't even think about a settlement. You came into this house with nothing. So, get to work, wash those dishes. It's your last job in this house. The door slammed shut, and I was alone again. Into the cold water in the sink, warm drops began to fall, one after another. They were tears. The tears I had held back for 5 years, no matter what humiliation I had to endure. They now flowed in an unstoppable stream. It's over. No, I have to end it. This life of lies that I so desperately tried to preserve for 5 years, and I will have my revenge on those who took everything from me. I wiped my wet hands on my apron and walked to a corner of the kitchen. With a trembling hand, I pulled my smartphone from my purse, found the single name in my contacts, and pressed the call button. After a few rings, a deep, concerned voice answered. Ava? What happened? Is something wrong? Barely holding back a sob, I forced out the words, Dad, I can't take it anymore. At that moment, no one yet knew that those words would be the beginning of the end, the prelude to a catastrophe that would shake the Smith family to its very foundations. The icy water numbed my fingertips. Clink, clink. The soulless sound of porcelain plates clashing was the only thing breaking the kitchen's silence. Staring at the mountain of dishes, my mind drifted back 5 years. I met him, David Smith, at a dinner party hosted by mutual friends. At the time, I was concealing my connection to Thomson Global, the company run by my father, and was working under the alias Ava Peters at one of its subsidiaries as a regular office employee. "Hi, I'm David Smith," he said, giving a slightly shy bow. I still remember it clearly. His modest suit, his earnest eyes, and his slightly tanned, handsome face. He told me he was a sales manager at a small company, working hard every day. His sincerity and decency won me over at first sight. I had always been surrounded by men interested only in my status as Robert Thompson's daughter. But he was different. He knew nothing of my background or fortune. He saw me simply as Ava Peters, an ordinary woman. "When I'm with you, Ava, I feel so calm. My soul is at rest," he told me more than once as we sat on a park bench, drinking coffee from paper cups. I remember tears of joy welling in my eyes. 6 months later, he proposed, offering a modest silver ring. "My salary isn't great, and I might not be able to give you a life of luxury, but I promise I will spend my life taking care of only you. Marry me." I was on top of the world. I had finally found someone who loved me for me. However, my father, Robert Thompson, was vehemently against our marriage. "Ava, to get married while hiding your identity is far too risky," he said, sitting in his massive leather chairman's chair, looking at me sternly. "When your secret is revealed, who knows how he and his family will change?" "Dad, David's not like that," I argued desperately. "I want to be loved as Ava Peters, not as the heiress to Thomson Global. I want to build my own happiness." Seeing my determination, my father sighed deeply and set one condition. "All right, it's your life, but promise me one thing. As your father, I will secretly support you, ensuring you never want for money and that your husband's company prospers. But if you are ever hurt, you must tell me immediately. And then, your father will end it all." At the time, I didn't fully understand the meaning of his words. So I entered the Smith family, fabricating a story that I had lost my parents early and was left all alone in the world without any relatives. However, my humble dreams began to crumble the very next day after the wedding. My mother-in-law, Susan, upon learning of my orphan status, began to look down on me. "You can't do anything, can you? Can't even do this. How were you raised? Oh, that's right, you're an orphan. Well, it can't be helped. I'll have to retrain you from scratch. So you should be grateful." Waking up at 5 a.m., preparing breakfast and packed lunches for the entire family. During the day, cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping. In the evening, dinner, served with minute precision. Susan's demands grew daily. A year after the wedding, the company where David worked, Smith Tech, unexpectedly landed a major contract with a leading automaker. "Hooray! Ava, our company is going to be working with a subsidiary of Thomson Global." David, ecstatic as a child, hugged me. I knew it was because of my father, but I didn't want to spoil his joy and just smiled silently. As the company's revenue grew, the Smiths' life improved noticeably. They built a new house in an exclusive New Jersey suburb. My father-in-law started driving an expensive foreign car, but along with this, their attitude toward me grew worse. David earns so much, and his wife just sits at home all day, doing nothing. And after 3 years of marriage, she can't even produce an heir. Utterly useless. My poor son. David changed too. The sincere young man of the past had transformed into an arrogant man with success. He started coming home late, spending his weekends at supposed business meetings and corporate golf outings. And 6 months ago, His shirt started smelling of an unfamiliar sweet perfume. When I tried to talk to my mother-in-law, all I heard were cold words. So, a man plays around a little on the side. What's the big deal? Get over it. It's because you're not an attractive wife. You can't even have a child, and now you can't even hold on to your husband. No one was on my side. In this house, I wasn't a person, just a maid, an instrument for maintaining social appearances. Crash! My hand trembled, and a pristine white dinner plate fell to the bottom of the sink and shattered. The sharp sound brought me back to the cold reality of the kitchen. The shards of the plate were like my soul. Everything I had so desperately protected for 5 years turned out to be so fragile and worthless. I had loved that sincere young man who shyly spoke of his dreams on a park bench. But who was this man now, sitting next to his mistress and smiling happily? The gentle smile of the past, David, and his cold betrayal in the present mingled in my mind, tearing my heart to pieces. I no longer believe in anything. Everything I believed in has betrayed me. With trembling fingers, I swiped across my smartphone screen. After a short conversation with my father, I stood up silently. In my soul, it was no longer sadness that raged, but a cold, quiet flame of anger, capable of burning everything to the ground. In the heart of Manhattan, in the bustling financial district, stood the skyscraper headquarters of Thomson Global. In the chairman's office, on the top floor, Robert Thompson, clutching the phone, looked out at the sprawling night city. The glittering lights of the skyscrapers were not reflected in his eyes. Right now, Thompson's mind was consumed by only one thing: the desperate call from his daughter, Ava. Dad, I can't take it anymore. That barely audible, choked voice. The 5 years of suffering and despair packed into that one phrase stabbed at Robert Thompson's heart like sharp fangs. The faint sound of a dish breaking, a stifled sob. He instantly understood the humiliating position his beloved daughter was in, and an unprecedented rage seized him. Slamming the phone down, Thompson forcefully pressed the intercom button. Before even one beep could sound, a calm and collected voice came from the speaker. Mr. Chairman, you buzzed? It was the head of his executive office. Mr. Evans. Evans. In my office. Now. Thompson's voice was low and cold as steel. Sensing the notes of extraordinary anger in it, Evans replied curtly, Yes, sir. A few minutes later, after a knock, Evans appeared. Having served for many years as Thompson's right-hand man, he understood everything from a single look at his boss. Sir, does this concern your daughter? Thompson didn't answer, merely nodding toward the sofa. Waiting until Evans had quietly sat down, he spoke heavily. Paul Smith, president of Smith Tech. Correct? Yes, sir. 5 years ago, we began a partnership with them as a component supplier. Components? Thompson snorted. As I recall, before I intervened, it was a decrepit little factory on the verge of bankruptcy. 5 years ago, when Ava decided to marry, Thompson had secretly ordered a thorough check of Smith Tech's financial condition. The results were abysmal. Outdated technology, a precarious financial position, and the incompetence of its leader, Paul Smith. In essence, it was a company not worth the slightest attention from Thomson Global, but for his daughter's happiness, Thompson acted. Technical support from the holding company, transfer of management know-how, and most importantly, the impeccable reputation of being a key partner of Thomson Global. By providing all this with a generous hand, he had allowed Smith Tech to perform a miraculous V-shaped recovery, turning it into a notable and successful enterprise in its industry. It seems they have absolutely no idea to whom they owe their success. Thompson picked up a photograph from his desk. In it, a little Ava with a radiant smile was hugging him. My only daughter, my treasure. These idiots have been humiliating her for 5 years. The sound of him grinding his teeth echoed in the quiet office. Tonight, at a celebration, they seated her husband's mistress at the head table as an honored guest, and sent my daughter to the kitchen to wash dishes. At these words, Evans's eyebrows, always maintaining an imperturbable calm, twitched almost imperceptibly. "Sir, is this information confirmed? I just spoke with Ava. There is no doubt." Thompson carefully placed the photograph down and turned to Evans. His eyes were as cold as ice. There was not a single emotion in them. This was how he became when, in building his empire, he ruthlessly destroyed his enemies. "Evans, I'm giving an order." "Listening, sir." Evans stood up sharply and straightened his posture. "Monday at 9 a.m. sharp. Immediately and unconditionally terminate all operations with Smith Tech. Reason: serious concerns regarding their corporate ethics." "Understood. Notify all subsidiaries and second and third tier partners. And of course, inform them that any company continuing to do business with Smith Tech will be permanently excluded from our group's supply chain. No exceptions." This was, in effect, a death sentence for Smith Tech. Completely cut off from the gigantic economic ecosystem of Thomson Global, the company had no chance of survival. Next, contact their primary bank and all affiliated financial institutions, Thomson continued. Demand the immediate repayment of all loans and a complete halt to any new financing for Smith Tech. Officially, this should appear as the bank's own decision. "Sir, if we do that, Smith Tech won't last a week. They'll have a cash flow crisis and go bankrupt." Thompson silently shook his head. "Bankruptcy is too lenient." He pulled a fountain pen from a desk drawer. "Paul Smith has undoubtedly used a portion of the technical assistance funds from our group for personal enrichment. With my money, he bought expensive cars and built a mansion. Prepare the documents to open a criminal investigation for misappropriation, embezzlement, and fraud." "Yes, sir. I will contact the legal department immediately." Evans flawlessly typed his boss's words into his tablet. There was not a shadow of a doubt in his movements. After giving all the instructions, Thompson looked out the window again. The storm of his anger had subsided, and in his heart remained only a deep love for his daughter and a cold determination for the coming revenge. "The price for what they took from my daughter over these 5 years," he muttered quietly. As if speaking to himself, "They won't get off with just money, social standing, everything they've built, and their family ties. I will rip it all out by the roots." The Smith family could not yet imagine the true horror that these words carried. The hourglass that sustained their lives had already begun to drain. There were only 36 hours left until their complete and final destruction. The countdown had already begun. Sunday morning. The faint light filtering through the gaps in the blinds touched my eyelids. I slowly opened my eyes to the familiar wooden ceiling, a view I had seen every morning for 5 years. But today, there was a strange feeling, as if I were in an unfamiliar hotel room. Yes, this place was no longer mine. I quietly got out of bed and opened the window. The cold November air rushed into the room, cooling my burning cheeks. The chill was surprisingly pleasant. I opened the closet. Hanging there, holding their breath, were my clothes, the clothes of the Smith's daughter-in-law, bought over the last 5 years. Beige, gray, navy blue, only modest, faceless things, chosen to suit my mother-in-law's taste. I would never wear them again. Methodically, one by one, I folded these clothes into a large suitcase on the floor. This brown dress, I wore it on our first wedding anniversary, when David and I went to a restaurant. He had barely arrived when he said he had urgent work to do and left. I ended up eating a cold dinner alone. This gray suit, I wore it to my father-in-law's company anniversary. My mother-in-law made me buy it on sale at a department store, saying, "You're just the help. This cheap thing is good enough for you." Every item was steeped in humiliation and sadness. I closed the lid of the suitcase, as if sealing those memories deep inside. From the farthest corner of the closet, I pulled out a dusty cardboard box. Inside were the clothes I used to love to wear before I got married. Bright colors, bold designs, a symbol of the free and vibrant Ava Thompson I used to be. I carefully packed these items into a separate travel bag. Without knocking, the bedroom door was rudely thrown open. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway, arms crossed, And behind her, with a smug smile, was Veronica. "Oh, you're still here. Hurry up and pack your things." My mother-in-law gave me a disdainful look and unceremoniously entered the room. Veronica followed with a cheerful expression. Paying no attention to me, they spread out interior design magazines. "Susan, what if we put up damask wallpaper in this room?" "Oh, a wonderful idea." "And the bed, of course, must have a canopy, right? And by this window, we'll put a large vanity table." The room where I had slept, cried, and endured for 5 years was being easily redecorated in another woman's colors right before my eyes. Veronica walked over to my vanity table and disdainfully poked a finger at a bottle of drugstore lotion. Ugh. She used this cheap stuff from the supermarket? Unbelievable. "It'll ruin your skin," she said, deliberately loud. "Susan, please throw out all this junk before I move in. I hate secondhand things." "Of course, dear. For you, I'll buy everything new from Chanel, from skincare to makeup. You deserve only the best." The piercing laughter of my mother-in-law and Veronica stabbed at my mind. I silently packed the last of my things into the bag. I felt neither anger nor sadness. My soul was filled with the calm of absolute zero and a firm resolve for the future. After packing, I left the room. In the living room, my father-in-law, David, and my mother-in-law were sitting on the sofa, laughing loudly at a morning TV show, a perfect picture of a happy family. Of course, I was not in it. As I crossed the living room, no one even called out to me. It was as if I had never existed in this house, as if I had been erased from their memory. Only David, without taking his eyes off the TV, coldly tossed out, "What? You're not gone yet? Get out and leave the house key on the table." I did as he said. I took the key from my purse, a cold piece of metal that had welcomed me home for 5 years, and placed it on the coffee table with a soft click. It was the last sound I made in that house. Putting on my shoes at the door, I took one last look back. The hardwood floors I polished every day, the neatly arranged pillows in the living room, the kitchen where I had cooked for the family. My 5 years had definitely been spent here, but I couldn't recall a single happy moment. I quietly closed the front door. The cold outside air seemed to clear my thoughts. I looked up. A gray winter sky stretched to infinity. "Goodbye, Smith family," I whispered into the void. The wheels of my suitcase rumbled on the pavement. "You have every right to laugh in your false happiness." A black executive sedan pulled up silently in front of me. The back door opened, and a familiar elderly driver bowed low. There are only a few hours left. I got into the car, shaking off the past. From the window of the smoothly moving car, the house where I had spent 5 years quickly shrank in the distance. I swear, I will never come back here. It was a deceptively quiet Sunday morning before the storm. Monday morning. The president's office of Smith Tech, located in an industrial park in New Jersey. Here, basking in the afterglow of the anniversary gala, sat my father-in-law, Paul Smith, with the most radiant expression on his face. Ah, coffee on a Monday morning, it's something special. Smith Sr. leaned back deeply in his custom leather chair and took a sip of fragrant Arabica. The morning sun illuminated his balding head, as if blessing the prosperity of the kingdom he believed he had built himself. "Mr. Smith, good morning." With a knock, his deputy and son, David, entered the office. He, too, was dressed in a new Italian suit and radiated confidence. "Ah, David, it's you. Your mother's anniversary went off without a hitch." "Yeah, and most importantly, I never realized how tactful and attentive Veronica is. Mom is thrilled with her." "Tell me about it." "Not like that dreary Ava. After all, what matters in a woman is charm and background. Veronica's family isn't poor, you know." "Exactly. Now, our family's fortunes are sure to rise." Father and son exchanged a look and burst into vulgar laughter. In their minds, there was not a shadow of a memory of Ava, whom they had kicked out yesterday. For them, their current life, the success of the company, and their social status were a deserved reward, earned by their own efforts, and they had no doubt it would last forever. The hands of the wall clock showed 9 a.m. A bell rang, announcing the start of the workday. For them, it was the beginning of a new week, and also the signal for the gates of hell to open. Whir, whir, the soulless sound of an incoming fax broke the silence of the office. Usually, it was ignored, but today, it sounded somehow ominous. A moment later, a secretary, pale as a sheet, rushed into the office, barely knocking. "Mr. Smith, it's terrible! What's all the noise?" "Don't yell first thing in the morning," Smith grumbled, annoyed, but noticing the secretary's deathly pallor, he put down his cup. "What happened? Did the fax machine break?" "No. It's from Thomson Global. It's urgent." With a trembling hand, she handed him a sheet of paper. At the sight of the logo of the holding company that ruled the country's economy, a chill ran down Smith Sr.'s spine. "From Thomson Global? What is it? An order for a new product?" He casually took the paper, adjusted his glasses, and scanned the text. Notice of termination of framework cooperation agreement. The headline didn't register. Termination of agreement. Smith blinked several times, rereading the text. "This serves as notice of the immediate termination of all cooperation agreements with your company as of 9 a.m. today and the cessation of all business operations. This decision applies to Thomson Global and all companies within the group." "What? What is this?" Smith's voice cracked. "Cessation of cooperation with all group companies? This is absurd. I haven't heard anything about this." "Dad, what's wrong?" David, sensing trouble, looked over his father's shoulder at the fax. He too froze, holding his breath. "No way. If we lose the Thomson Global contract, that's 70% of our sales." Cold sweat poured down Smith Sr.'s forehead. "No, if you count the subsidiaries, it's almost 80%. And as of today, all of that is zero. This couldn't be happening." Smith Tech had invested in equipment and hired staff, banking on orders from the Thomson Global Group. To sever this artery meant the company would die instantly. This has to be some kind of joke. A mistake. "David, call their procurement department immediately. Talk to Peterson. This must be a misunderstanding." "Right." David frantically grabbed the phone and hit speed dial. The few seconds while it rang felt like an eternity. Smith Sr., clasping his hands in a prayer-like gesture, stared at his son. "Hello, yes. This is Smith from Smith Tech. We just received your fax. It seems there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "What?" David's expression changed rapidly, turning a shade of despair. "But you can't just—" "A sudden termination of the contract? We have a ton of outstanding orders. What are we supposed to do with them?" Smith Sr. couldn't stand it and snatched the phone from his son. "Hello? This is President Smith. Peterson? What kind of joke is this? We've been partners for 5 years." "Partners?" The voice on the other end was not the familiar, friendly voice of Peterson. It was cold and emotionless, like a robot. "Mr. Smith, our company has deemed your organization an unsuitable business partner. Nothing more, nothing less." "Unsuitable? But we have absolute confidence in the quality of our products. We've never missed a delivery deadline," Smith shouted, spittle flying. "Explain the reason. I can't accept this." There was a short pause on the other end of the line. The weight of that silence crushed Smith's heart. Due to serious concerns regarding corporate ethics and identified instances of actions that grossly violate the principles of our group. "Corporate ethics? Violations? What are you talking about? We haven't done anything illegal." "You will receive the details in an official letter from our legal department. I will add that this decision was made by the board of directors and personally approved by the chairman. It is final and not subject to appeal." "By the chairman? Personally?" Robert Thomson, the titan of the American economy, personally dealt with terminating a contract with a small company like ours? Impossible. Goodbye. I must ask you to refrain from any further direct contact with our company. Wait, Peterson! Pete. Beep, beep, beep. The merciless electronic sound announced the end. Clutching the receiver, Smith Sr. sank to the floor. His knees were trembling. He had no strength. Everything was spinning before his eyes. "Dad? What happened?" David asked, a sliver of hope in his voice. Smith Sr. looked at his son with the eyes of a ghost. We've been cut off. Thomson Global just cut us off." At that moment, the phones in the office, which had been silent until then, began to ring all at once. Ring, 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 like an air raid siren. "Yes, Smith Tech, hello?" the secretary answered in a frightened voice. "What? Oh, yes. One moment. Mr. Smith, it's Metal Invest on the line. They're asking if it's true that Thomson Global terminated our contract and they want to recall the parts they've already delivered. And I have Translogistics on my line. They want to cancel this month's shipping contract," another employee shouted. The moment Smith Tech lost its powerful patron in Thomson Global, all its partner companies, who had been bowing and scraping just yesterday, immediately descended upon them like vultures. "This can't be happening!" Smith Sr. clutched his head and curled up on the floor. Just 10 minutes ago, he was on top of the world, and now everything was collapsing with a deafening crash. The sun was still shining outside, but in the president's office, a cold, dark gloom of despair had settled. What did we do? His trembling whisper was lost in the incessant ringing of the phones. They still didn't know that the cause of this inexplicable catastrophe was the very woman they had sent to the kitchen yesterday. Ring, ring, click, click. The insane cacophony of electronic sounds filled the Smith Tech office. These weren't just phone calls. They were the company's death rattle. Mr. Smith, the head of finance from Specmoc, is on the line. He says they're suspending payment for products we've already delivered. "David, Autotrans is turning our trucks around. We can't ship our goods." Desperate cries came from all sides. The office, which had welcomed a calm Monday morning just a few hours ago, had turned into a battlefield gripped by panic. My father-in-law, Paul, his face slick with sweat, desperately clung to the phone. On the other end was the director of a small subcontracting factory they had worked with since the beginning. "Bill, I'm begging you. Don't stop the component shipments. We've been working together for 20 years. Paul's voice was no longer a request, but a pathetic plea. "Sorry, Paul, but I can't." The voice on the other end was full of regret, but the refusal was firm. "Word on the street is that if you do business with Smith Tech, you'll face the wrath of Thomson Global. I've got a small factory. If Thomson Global and their partners stop giving me orders, I won't be able to feed my family. I can't risk everything for old friendship's sake. But Bill..." Bill, click. The merciless sound cut the connection. 20 years of a trusted relationship turned out to be lighter than dust in the face of fear. Meanwhile, David, pale as death, sat at his desk, clutching his cell phone. He was trying to ask for help from a college buddy who was now a top executive at a rival firm, a man with whom he often drank and who called him bro. "Steve, please, help me out, just temporarily. Buy out our inventory. We're in a cash crunch." "Hold on." Steve's voice was icy. "What the hell did you do? They're saying Thomson Global's lawyers are involved. And this isn't just a contract termination. It looks like they've decided to make an example of you," he continued, his tone dripping with disdain. "Sorry, man, but don't drag me into this. Don't call me again. I'm blocking your number." "Steve, wait, bro." The screen went dark. The word bro turned out to be just a ghost, disappearing along with the money. The dominoes kept falling. One piece fell, triggering a chain reaction, and the collapse accelerated. "Mr. Smith, I'm afraid to answer the phones." The oldest employee in accounting burst into tears and slumped to the floor. The other employees also stopped working and stared at the father and son with empty eyes. There was no sympathy in their gazes, only a quiet, sharp hatred for the management that had put their own livelihoods at risk. In this oppressive atmosphere, David's cell phone made a cheerful notification sound. At this inappropriate noise, all the cold stares instantly turned to him. On the screen was a message from Veronica. "Dave, what's going on?" I tried to use my card at the boutique, and it was declined. Something inside, David snapped. The company was on the brink of collapse. He was groveling for help, and this woman was complaining about a credit card. With trembling fingers, he hit the call button. Hello? Veronica? Dave, finally. Call the bank and sort this out. Shut up! David's roar echoed through the silent office. What? What's wrong with you? This isn't the time. The company's in huge trouble. Who gives a damn about a credit card? Don't you dare call me about such trivial things again. He slammed the phone onto the desk. The screen cracked, but he didn't care. Veronica's voice, which had seemed so sweet to him just yesterday, now only grated on his nerves. At that moment, the pale head of sales timidly approached Paul Smith. Mr. Smith. Our contact at Promtrade just called. He dropped a phrase. Just in passing. What? What did he say? He said, What did you guys do? Managed to cross the chairman of Thomson Global himself. The chairman? He said Thomson Global never sinks a company this openly just for business reasons. This feels personal, like some kind of revenge. Paul Smith held his breath. Personal revenge? Not business, but emotion? He couldn't recall anything of the sort. They were just doing business. They had just kicked out a useless daughter-in-law and welcomed a new one. Could it be? A sinister thought flashed through Paul's mind. But it seemed so absurd, so unreal. What possible connection could there be between that modest, unremarkable orphan Ava and the chairman of Thomson Global? Nonsense. It can't be. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. But reality did not wait. The office front door swung open, and several men in business suits entered. On their lapels glinted the familiar logos of their primary bank. Paul's breath caught in his throat. Their eyes were as cold as executioners, without a shred of compassion. The domino of destruction was about to topple the last and largest piece. Click, clack, click. The sharp sound of expensive shoes cut through the oppressive silence of the office, like footsteps leading to the gallows. The manager of their primary bank, Mr. O'Brien, and two of his subordinates entered the office. Usually, these men would enter with sycophantic smiles and questions like, Paul, how are things? But today, O'Brien's face was as cold as a mask, devoid of any emotion. Mr. O'Brien. I was expecting you. Paul, like a drowning man grasping at a straw, approached him. Look at this nightmare. Thomson Global suddenly terminated all our contracts. I'm sure it's some kind of mistake. We temporarily need some financial. Mr. Smith. O'Brien's voice was as sharp as a blade. I didn't come for a social chat. Let me be direct. One of O'Brien's subordinates placed a document on the table. At the top, in red letters, was printed, Notice of Acceleration of Debt. As of today, the bank has reevaluated your company's credit rating from requires attention to risk of bankruptcy. What? In connection with this, we are demanding the immediate, one-time repayment of the entire outstanding balance on your working capital and investment loans, namely $50 million. A whistling sound escaped Paul's throat. David, standing nearby, also froze with wide eyes, as if he had been struck by lightning. Are you crazy? A one-time repayment? Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? We've been working with you for 15 years. Isn't a bank supposed to support its clients in tough times? Paul slammed his fist on the table, but O'Brien didn't even flinch. He continued in a glacial tone. Please refer to Section 8 of your loan agreement. In the event of a threat to creditworthiness, the bank has the right to demand immediate repayment of the debt. The termination of your partnership with Thomson Global is the most serious threat imaginable, wouldn't you say? Yes. But if you give us some time, we'll definitely recover. That's impossible. O'Brien's eyes flashed from behind his glasses as he looked Paul straight in the eye. Let me be frank with you, Mr. Smith. Our head office has received information. Information that Smith Tech may have been using technical assistance funds from the Thomson Global Group for non-designated purposes. Paul's heart began to pound violently. Cold sweat streamed down his temples. I wouldn't say it's outright accounting fraud, but there are suspicions of improper bookkeeping, specifically unjustifiably high executive compensation and the use of funds for personal enrichment. O'Brien's gaze flickered to the Rolex on Paul's wrist and the expensive car visible through the window. Paul instinctively tried to hide his watch under his cuff. This can't be happening! An investigation has already begun. If the facts are confirmed, it's a serious violation that could be classified as fraud. Paul's knees began to tremble. He knew exactly what O'Brien was talking about. Ever since the generous infusions from Thomson Global started flowing, he had been spending company money as if it were his own. Remodeling the mansion, buying a vacation home, supporting a mistress, and now, all of it was about to be exposed. We're not monsters, Mr. Smith. But the decision of the head office's credit committee is final. O'Brien impassively handed him the notice. The deadline for repayment is tomorrow by 3 p.m. If the funds are not received, we will begin the process of seizing the collateralized assets this factory and your home. And my home? You are the personal guarantor, so that's a given. O'Brien didn't even bow. Well, we await your payment. Though I'm afraid that's only possible if a miracle occurs. The bankers left. Slam! The heavy door shut. To Paul, the sound was like the lid of a coffin closing. Dad, what do we do? The silence was broken by David's desperate cry. $50 million! We'll never find it! We'll be thrown out on the street! Shut up! Stop whining! Paul snapped, but there was no force in his voice. He collapsed into his chair and stared at the ceiling. Why? Why did all this happen? Just yesterday, everything was perfect. He was sure he was a winner in life, and in one day, because of one fax, his life was crumbling. As if an invisible giant hand had swept all the pieces off the chessboard. Who? Paul whispered. Who set us up? The sudden contract termination from Thomson Global. The information at the bank about embezzlement. It all happened too perfectly. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone with a clear intention to destroy Smith Tech. No. To destroy Paul Smith had struck. A person who could influence the chairman of Thomson Global and knew all the internal affairs of Smith Tech. Did such a person exist? A memory surfaced in Paul's mind. 5 years ago, at David and Ava's wedding. In the farthest corner of the modest reception hall, a distinguished older gentleman had sat for a short while. Congratulations. Take care of Ava. From under a deeply pulled-down hat, a sharp gaze had glinted. At the time, Paul had thought it was some distant relative of Ava's and paid it no mind. A mysterious guest who hadn't even left a business card. With a trembling hand, Paul began to rummage through a desk drawer. An old album. Wedding photos. There, in the corner of one, shot his back and profile. Paul frantically grabbed the mouse and opened a search engine. Chairman of the board, Thomson Global. A photo of Robert Thomson appeared on the screen, and the profile of the man in the picture. The two images merged in his mind. A silent scream escaped his throat. Blood rushed to his head. His heart hammered as if it were about to explode. It can't be! It can't be! That man is the chairman of Thomson Global! Which means, on that day, take care of Ava. With terror, Paul typed new words into the search bar. Robert Thomson, daughter. His fingers went numb with horror. Click! 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 In the deafening silence of the office, only the dry sound of the clicking mouse could be heard. Dad, what are you looking for? We need to find money, not surf the internet. David, in despair, shook his father's shoulder. But Paul didn't hear him. All his attention was fixed on the monitor. Paul's face, illuminated by the screen's light, was no longer gray, but ashen. Drops of sweat from his forehead fell onto his glasses, blurring his vision. But he continued scrolling the page without blinking. The search query. Robert Thomson, family. The screen showed only society columns and gossip. The emperor of business. Personal life shrouded in mystery. Known as a family man. But his wife passed away long ago. The information control of Thomson Global was impeccable. There was almost no concrete information about his family online. Damn it! There's nothing! In despair, Paul slammed his fist on the desk. If his guess was wrong, this was just paranoia. But if it was right, the words of that mysterious gentleman at the wedding. Take care of Ava. If that was Robert Thomson himself, then everything fit. Frighteningly, perfectly. Dad, what's going on? What does Thomson have to do with this? David couldn't take it anymore. Paul looked at his son with the eyes of a man who had seen a ghost. David, do you know Ava's maiden name? What? What are you talking about? It's Smith. Just like me. I'm not talking about the name on her driver's license, but her birth name. She said she was an orphan. No relatives. I don't know for sure, but I think her mother's maiden name was something simple. Like Jones. Paul grabbed his head. That's it? She was lying. No. She was hiding it. The perfect disguise, the orphan daughter-in-law. Paul took up the mouse again and changed the search query. This time, he searched through archives of old business magazines. Robert Thomson, daughter. A few minutes later, he found an old PDF article. It was an issue of a high society monthly from a decade ago. In it was a small notice. Robert Thomson's only daughter, A. 20. After graduating from an elite boarding school in Switzerland, has enrolled at Columbia University. She is known to be extremely private and seeks an independent life, not wishing to use her father's position. There was no photo, only an initial, but the phrase seeks an independent life pierced Paul's chest. Wait a minute. In Paul's mind, the scattered puzzle pieces began to fit together with terrifying speed. 5 years ago, Smith Tech was a rundown factory with no technology and no money. And what happened after Ava entered their family? The month after the wedding, a representative from Thomson Global suddenly showed up, offering a contract on unbelievable terms. We see the potential in your company, he had said. Wasn't that my achievement? 6 months later, the bank, despite insufficient collateral, easily gave them a $50 million loan to build a new facility. We believe in your management talent, they had said. Wasn't that my reputation? Another year later, when problems arose with buying the adjacent plot of land, the opponent suddenly softened his position and sold them the land at a favorable price. Everything had gone like magic, and I believed it was my talent as a leader. That fortune had finally smiled upon me. Ha! Ha ha! A dry laugh escaped Paul's lips. It wasn't me, Paul whispered with trembling lips. It wasn't my achievement. And it wasn't your sales talent, David. What are you talking about? It was all Ava. He jumped up from his chair. Because she was in this house, Thomson Global gave us work. The bank gave us money. Ava isn't just a dishwasher. She's a walking line of credit. David was stunned. Ava? That gray mouse who can't string 2 words together? Shut up, you idiot! Paul roared. You cheated on her. You kicked her out yesterday. And the next day we lose all our contracts. You think that's a coincidence? We made a terrible mistake. An icy dread ran down Paul's spine. We thought we were carrying a golden goose on our shoulders. But in reality, we kicked God himself out of the house. No way. David's face also lost all color. It seemed he was finally beginning to understand the scale of the catastrophe. We need confirmation. Proof. Paul, with a prayer on his lips, made one last search attempt. Please, let this just be a coincidence. Let Ava be a nobody. With trembling fingers, he typed in the search. Columbia University Alumni Database leak. He entered the year of graduation and the department Ava had claimed to graduate from. A list appeared on the screen. His finger, scrolling the page, was slick with sweat. The letter P. Peters. Ava. The name wasn't there. Her entire biography, as Ava Peters, was a fake. But in the list under the letter T, that name was there. Thompson, Ava. And next to it, a small but clear photo, 5 years younger, with a slight youthful roundness to her cheeks. But without a doubt, the face of the same daughter-in-law they had forced to wash dishes just yesterday. Ah! 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 Paul let out a wild scream and fell backward, chair and all. Boom! Dad! David ran to him and looked at the monitor, and he too froze, as if turned to stone. It can't be! That's Ava! On the screen, Ava smiled with an intelligent, dignified smile. It was not at all the frightened expression they were used to seeing in their home. It was an aura that couldn't be hidden. The aura of the daughter of the man at the pinnacle of the American economy. And Paul, lying on the floor, trembled uncontrollably. It's over. This is the end. For 5 years, we treated her like a slave, and in the end, we threw her out like trash. And we did it to the most dangerous man in America. Now it all made sense. The contract termination, the loan recall. This wasn't business. This was a methodical execution by a loving father. Dad, what do we do? David whispered in a tearful voice. Yesterday, I told her she was worthless. You idiot, Paul moaned. What have you done? But he himself was an accomplice. Yesterday, at that gala, he had introduced Veronica as the new family and had laughed at Ava. There was no way out, no excuse. On the floor, before Paul's eyes, the computer monitor continued to mercilessly display the truth. Ava Thompson. Those words looked like an epitaph on the grave of the Smith family. What on earth is going on in here? With a hysterical shriek, the office door flew open. In walked my mother-in-law, Susan. Around her neck was the Hermes scarf Veronica had given her yesterday, and in her hands were shopping bags from expensive boutiques. But her face was contorted with anger. I tried to pay for a taxi, and my card was declined. The humiliation. What is all this? She slammed her purchases onto the sofa and stared at her husband and son. She still didn't know anything, didn't know that the ground had already vanished from beneath her feet and she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Quiet, Paul moaned, not getting up from the floor. What do you mean, quiet? I came because they said there were problems at the company, and you're lying on the floor. What a pathetic sight. Get up. She noticed her husband's strange state, but she was more concerned with her own wounded pride. If the bank is making noise, I'll call them myself. I'll tell them we're practically family with Thompson Global. They'll shut up right away. Shut up! Paul's furious roar cut her off. Susan recoiled. In all their years together, her husband had never raised his voice to her like that. Don't you dare say the name Thompson Global. Ever again? Paul looked at her with bloodshot eyes. In them was not anger, but bottomless terror. What's wrong with you? She backed away. David, what's wrong with your father? David, with a deathly pale face, slowly raised his head. His lips were purple with fear. Mom, look! With a trembling finger, he pointed at the computer monitor. The alumni database photo was still there. What is it? Susan suspiciously approached the monitor, put on her glasses, and peered at the screen. Thompson. Ava. Who's that? She snorted. Don't tell me. David's new flame. With Veronica still in the picture? No! David shouted. Look closely at the face. That's the face of the daughter-in-law you tormented for 5 years. Susan flinched and looked at the screen again. Intelligent eyes. A refined nose. Aristocratic lips. The woman in the photo did look familiar. The same mousy girl in an apron, no makeup, hair pulled back in a ponytail. Ava. It looks like her. But so what? She still didn't understand. Ava Smith was an orphan and a nobody. She couldn't have a name like that. It was a lie. Paul yelled, slamming his fist on the floor. She hid her identity. Ava Thompson, the only daughter of the chairman of Thompson Global, Robert Thompson. Susan's thoughts came to a screeching halt. The blood froze in her veins. Robert Thompson? The chairman of Thompson Global? That girl, the one I constantly criticized for her lack of breeding. What kind of nonsense is this? A hysterical laugh escaped her lips. That mousy little girl? A billionaire's heiress? Impossible. She didn't own a single designer item, and she always silently endured all my nitpicking. And that's the proof! Paul jumped up and grabbed her by the shoulders. Think about it! Why would a rundown factory like ours suddenly get a contract with Thompson Global 5 years ago? Why did the bank give us money as if it grew on trees? It wasn't our achievement. It was because she, the Thompson heiress, lived in this house. The blood drained from Susan's face. The world was rapidly losing its color. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. No, no, but the more she denied it, the more vividly memories surfaced, confirming the cruel truth. Her elegant, aristocratic movements when she made tea, her impeccable speech no matter how she was humiliated, and the occasional cold, commanding glance that would flash in her eyes. This wasn't just a submissive daughter-in-law. This was the nobility that is bred from childhood, that only true aristocrats possess. Oh! Susan covered her mouth with her hand. What have I done? Obviously from some no-name family. No parents, so no manners, always with that pathetic, poor expression on her face. I said that every day to one of the most prominent heiresses in America. To the only daughter whom the chairman of Thompson Global loved more than life itself. I treated her like a servant, like a slave. So, she whispered with a trembling voice, everything that's happening now. Yes, David answered in the voice of a dead man. The contracts, the loans, it's all revenge. A full-scale attack from her family. A short scream escaped Susan's throat. In her mind, the most terrible scene flashed. Yesterday, at her own anniversary gala, in that glittering ballroom, I had called her out. In front of 200 guests, I introduced her husband's mistress as the new family, completely annihilating her existence. And that wasn't all. What had I said to her? A daughter-in-law can't help out at the party? Go to the kitchen and wash dishes. Susan's body began to convulse. Her teeth chattered. I made Robert Thompson's daughter, the heiress to a multi-billion-dollar fortune, wash strangers' dirty plates in cold water while her husband's mistress sat at the head table and laughed. Ah, this wasn't just humiliating a daughter-in-law. It was the ultimate insult to Thompson Global itself. A declaration of war. Susan looked at her hands. The Hermes scarf, the expensive bags. Now it all seemed like useless trash. Because I kicked her out. Because I made her wash dishes. You put the final nail in the coffin, Paul moaned, clutching his head. Yesterday, maybe something could have been fixed, but no father would forgive that. The chairman is furious. He won't stop until he wipes us off the face of the earth. No! Susan screamed, tearing at her hair. Terror overwhelmed her. Her own foolishness, her own arrogance had destroyed her family's future in a single night. Everything they had built. I'm sorry, Ava, I'm sorry. She beat her head against the floor, apologizing to the empty air. I didn't know! I didn't know you were so important! You think that changes anything? Paul snapped. This is Thompson Global. There will be no forgiveness. David just stood there, stunned, watching his crazed parents. He, too, was one of these fools, blinded by an affair with Veronica and failing to see who his wife truly was. Outside the office window, the life of the city still bustled, but only the Smith family was on the edge of a precipice, cut off from the entire world. Susan, her face wet with tears and snot, raised her head and, with trembling lips, repeated the unbelievable fact once more. It was a confession of the most terrible sin of her life. I made the daughter of the chairman of Thompson Global wash dishes. No one answered. Only a silence named despair hung heavily over them. 2 p.m. David ran out of the office as if fleeing for his life. In the office remained his crazed mother and his catatonic father. He wanted to leave that hellish place as quickly as possible. Veronica. I need to see Veronica. He ran to a nearby cafe, clinging to the thought of her. Now that he was losing everything, only she was his support. Even if the company goes bankrupt, even if I lose all my money, she'll stay with me. After all, yesterday at the gala, she smiled so happily and said we would always be together now. Veronica was sitting at a table on the outdoor terrace. In the autumn sunlight, she elegantly crossed her legs and played with the straw in her glass of iced tea. She looked so luxurious and so cruelly beautiful. Veronica! David gasped, running up. Sorry, I'm late. It's chaos at the office. Late? Veronica slightly lowered her sunglasses and gave him a cold look. So, what's going on? I told you, my card doesn't work. You promised to get me an unlimited account, David faltered. Her first question wasn't about him, but about money, but right now he didn't even have the energy to notice. Sorry. The cards. Dad probably froze them. I need to talk to you about something serious. He sat down and tried to take her hand, but Veronica sharply pulled it away in disgust. What is it? Your palms are all sweaty. Ugh. Sorry. David frantically wiped his hands with a napkin. Veronica, listen carefully. Our company, Smith Tech, might go bankrupt. What? A deep crease formed between her eyebrows. What nonsense is this? You have a contract with Thomson Global. They terminated it. This morning. Suddenly, he began to explain, gasping with despair. And it's not just Thomson Global. The bank is demanding we repay all our loans. If we don't find $50 million by tomorrow, they'll take the company and the house. All expression vanished from Veronica's face. She set down her glass and silently stared at David. This was not the look of a loving woman. It was a cold, appraising gaze. So, you're going to be broke? For now, yes. But I'm young. I'll find another job. Veronica nonchalantly examined her nails. The diamond ring David had given her yesterday sparkled with mocking brightness. And the reason Thomson Global suddenly terminated the contract is... It was hard for David to say the words, but there was no point in hiding it. Ava. Ava? That dishwasher? Veronica snorted. She turned out to be Ava Thompson, the only daughter of the chairman of Thomson Global, Robert Thompson. She was hiding her identity when she married me. David buried his face in his hands on the table. Because we kicked her out yesterday, her father went ballistic and started his revenge. We messed with the most dangerous man in America. A long silence fell. The light jazz music playing in the cafe grated on the ears. David waited for her kind words. That's terrible. But I love you. We'll start over from scratch. He was waiting for something like that and fearfully raised his head. Ha ha! Ha 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 ha! He heard a dry, loud laugh that made the whole cafe turn. Veronica was laughing, holding her stomach, laughing until tears streamed down her face. Vous, Veronica? Brilliant! Just brilliant! She wiped away a tear and looked at David with pity. You're a real idiot. No, you're a clown. What are you saying? Am I wrong? For 5 years, you had a multi-billion-dollar treasure at your feet, and you thought it was a rock and kicked it around. Her voice turned sharply cold. And in the end, you picked up a fake piece of glass like me and were happy about it. You're hopeless. David couldn't believe his ears. A fake? Veronica, you love me. Yesterday, at the gala, that was work. She placed her glass on the table. I liked your status as the future president of Smith Tech and your money. There's nothing attractive about you yourself. A blow. As if he had been hit over the head. No, it can't be. You were so kind to me. You listened with such interest. That's called a business smile. Like corporate golf, Veronica took out a compact and began to touch up her makeup. Besides, you were a convenient lover. But as a husband, you're unreliable. insecure, and generally awful. Who needs you without money? David's hands began to tremble. 5 years ago, Ava had been different. When he was just a simple manager with a small salary and no prospects, Ava had held his hand and said, "You'll make it." She was the only woman who had seen him for himself, not his money or status. Had he really thrown away true love for an illusion? And now, even that illusion was crumbling like sand. Well, goodbye. Veronica stood up. Don't call me. I'm blocking your number, and I'm keeping this ring as compensation. I wasted my time on you, so it's only fair. Wait, Veronica. David frantically grabbed her arm. Don't leave me. I have nothing left. If you leave too, let go! Veronica wrenched her arm away in disgust. The sudden movement knocked over the glass, and the iced tea and ice spilled onto his Italian trousers. What a pathetic sight. She looked down at him with cold eyes. Ava Thompson is probably popping champagne right now, celebrating getting rid of someone like you. Suffer for the rest of your life. Click, clack, click. The sound of her heels faded into the distance. She never once looked back. Her posture, just like yesterday in the ballroom, was full of confidence, and she couldn't care less about David. He stood there, stunned, not wiping the spilled tea from his trousers. The cafe patrons whispered and laughed. Looking at him, looks like he got dumped. Serves him right. His legs gave out, and David collapsed to the floor. The sky was so blue, but his world had plunged into darkness. He finally realized what he had lost. The warm soup Ava used to make, her modest smile in the hallway, the warmth of her hand when she cared for him all night when he was sick. All of it was a treasure he would never get back. Ava. Large tears rolled down David's cheeks. What have I done? But tears of remorse wouldn't turn back time. All he had left was a company on the brink of bankruptcy with huge debts, crazed parents, and a house awaiting foreclosure. I have to go. David staggered to his feet. He might not have a place to go back to anymore, but he couldn't run from this reality. With a heavy gait, he trudged back to the office. His back seemed to have hunched even more in that hour. He looked as if he had aged several years, but hell had not yet shown him its bottom. Even more terrible news awaited him at the office. David! A pale employee shouted from the doorway. Look at the news! David took the tablet with a trembling hand. On the screen was a headline that would utterly destroy their reputation. No way. The tablet slipped from his hands and fell to the carpet with a dull thud. On the screen was a breaking news alert from a major financial publication. Smith Tech, under suspicion of accounting fraud. Investigation launched. The termination of the contract with Thomson Global had been the trigger. The article, citing sources, detailed facts of asset misappropriation by Paul Smith and the non-designated use of technical assistance funds. In the comments section, there were already thousands of angry messages. Serves them right. They exploited their subcontractors. Put the management in jail. The end. We're socially ruined. David sank to the floor. The company wouldn't just go bankrupt. Their family would be branded as criminals, and for the rest of their lives, people would point fingers at them. Stop whining! Susan's hysterical voice echoed through the silent office. With disheveled hair and a face contorted with rage, she tried to pull her husband and son to their feet. Let's go. Where? Paul asked in the voice of a dead man. Where? To the Thompsons. To Ava's house, she shouted with crazed eyes. If we can't reach them by phone, we'll go and beg in person. We'll get on our knees, do whatever it takes, but we'll get their forgiveness. It's useless. Paul shook his head. They're in a different league. They won't even let us on the property. We'll stand there until they do! She clutched her husband's chest. Do you want to go to jail? Do you want to end up on the street? I don't. I won't go back to that poor life. Never! Her persistence bordered on madness. Succumbing to this insane pressure, Paul and David staggered to their feet. 4 p.m. The Smiths' expensive sedan entered Greenwich, Connecticut, one of the most exclusive communities in the country. The scenery outside the window was from another world, nothing like their new-build subdivision. Dense forests, high stone walls like fortress ramparts, and behind them, huge, majestic mansions. Only the true elite who ruled the country lived here. The GPS announced they had arrived. Paul held his breath. Before them were gigantic wrought-iron gates, the size of gates to an ancient castle. On either side stretched endless walls of granite. Beyond the gates, a flawless landscaped park was visible, and the mansion itself was so far away it couldn't even be seen. This is Ava's home? David's jaw dropped. Their own mansion, which they considered a palace, would look like a servant's cottage here. For 5 years, they had bossed around the mistress of this castle, calling her a pauper and forcing her to work in their cramped kitchen. The realization of this absurd and cruel irony made his head spin. "Don't be cowards!" Susan jumped out of the car and ran to the intercom at the gate. Her hands were shaking, but she pressed the call button without hesitation. Ding-dong! The heavy sound of the chime dissolved into the silence. A long pause. The Smith family, huddled together, waited for an answer. The thudding of their hearts echoed in their ears. Finally, a crackle came from the speaker, followed by an icy, indifferent voice. "Yes? Thompson residence." A male voice. The butler. "Ah, hello. This is the Smiths. Paul Smith." Susan desperately shouted into the intercom camera. I'm Ava's mother-in-law. I mean, Miss Ava's. Is she home?" Another silence. This silence was more eloquent than any refusal. It spoke of their insignificance. "We have no acquaintances by the name of Smith." "What?" Susan's face froze. "What are you talking about? We lived together for 5 years. I'm her mother-in-law." "Please leave the premises." The businesslike, emotionless tone. "Wait! I beg you!" "We came to apologize." Paul intervened, bowing low to the camera. "I was a fool. I made a terrible mistake. Please, just for a minute, ask Mr. Chairman or Ava. Our company is collapsing." Cold sweat dripped from Paul's forehead onto the asphalt, but the voice from the speaker replied impassively. "Mr. Thompson has asked me to convey the following. The daughter we knew died to us 5 years ago. There is no one here who has any connection to you." "But Ava!" David clung to the gates. "Ava, can you hear me? It's me, David. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I love you. Let's start over. Please, come out." David's cry echoed through the quiet, exclusive neighborhood, but the gates did not open. Only the security camera watched the pathetic family with its soulless eye. "If you continue to cause a disturbance, we will be forced to call the police for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Leave the property immediately." The connection was cut. That sound was the sound of a final break, a sign that they were forever banished from Ava's world. "Ava! Ava!" Susan beat against the gates and sobbed. "Please, we're going to die. Help us." Her nails broke. Bloody streaks were left on the gates, but the giant steel gates didn't budge. "Mom, stop." David hugged his sobbing mother. People are watching. Residents of the neighboring mansions looked at them with bewilderment, as if they were crazy, as if they were outsiders. The pride of the Smith family, who just yesterday considered themselves winners, was now lying in the dirt. "Let's go," Paul whispered lifelessly. "If we stay, the police will really come. Then we won't even be able to file for bankruptcy." "I don't want to. I don't want to go back. It's hell there." Susan whined like a child, but she no longer had the strength to even stand. They stood before the giant gates, helpless and broken. Beyond the high wall must be Ava. Once, she had been so close. They had sat at the same table, lived under the same roof. But now between them lay not just a physical distance, but an eternal, insurmountable abyss. A wall they had built themselves over 5 years of humiliation and contempt. A cold evening wind blew, rustling the fallen leaves at their feet. From deep within the mansion, not a sound could be heard. They weren't even scolded. They were simply ignored, as if they didn't exist. This was the ultimate expression of contempt from the Thompson family. It's too late. The light went out in Paul's eyes. We have angered the gods. The warm light spilling from beyond the gates only highlighted the depth of their despair. They weren't even given the chance to apologize. They had no chance for forgiveness. All that was left for them was to silently await their end. A merciless, cold rain began to fall on the backs of the 3 people trudging toward their car. Wednesday, 3 p.m. At that moment, the world seemed to lose all sound. The production floor of Smith Tech. Normally at this time, machines would be humming, presses stamping, life would be bustling, but now, a dead silence reigned in the workshop. Time's up. A U.S., Marshall said matter-of-factly, glancing at his watch. Next to him, with an icy expression, stood the bank manager, O'Brien. Behind them were several burly men from a moving company, with cardboard boxes and stacks of red paper. Please, wait a little longer. Give us a little more time. Paul, clutching the dirty hem of his work coat, begged O'Brien. I'm looking for the money. A friend promised to lend it. Mr. Smith. O'Brien recoiled as if from something filthy. The deadline has passed. Not a single dollar has been deposited into the account. In accordance with the court's decision, we are beginning bankruptcy proceedings and the seizure of assets. Paul collapsed to his knees. The marshal, with an indifferent voice, signaled the workers. Begin. With that signal, the men spread out across the workshop. In their hands were ominous red stickers. Notice of seizure. Slap. Slap. The red stickers landed on the heart of the factory, the state-of-the-art CNC machines, the mountains of finished products, the safe in the office, the copy machine, the computers. It was the sound of the methodical dismantling of the castle Paul Smith had spent his life building. Mr. Smith, what are they doing to our machines? We won't be able to work. Workers ran up. Their eyes, once worried, had turned to anger. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Paul beat his head on the floor. All he could do was apologize, but one of the old foremen spat in his direction. Go to hell! What about our paychecks? Because you were living large, our lives are over too. Traitor! Give us our money! A barrage of curses. The subordinates who just yesterday were saying, Mr. Smith, we're with you to the end, now looked at him with hatred. Paul covered his ears and trembled. Was this the price for going against Thompson Global? Against Ava Thompson? Meanwhile, the same hellish scene was playing out at the Smith house. No! I'll never open the door! To the incessant ringing of the doorbell, Susan pressed her back against the door and screamed hysterically. In the living room, David sat with his head in his hands. Mom, it's useless. They'll call a locksmith and get in anyway. Shut up! I'll protect this house. It's mine. There was a screech of metal, then a click of the lock, forced entry. The door slowly opened, and men in dirty boots entered the house. Stop! Don't come in! This is trespassing! Susan tried to attack them, but a marshal easily stopped her. If you resist, it will be assault on a federal officer. Calm down. Calm down! Get out! Her screams were in vain. The men silently but efficiently began their work. Slap. A red sticker on the Italian sofa. Slap. On a painting by a famous foreign artist. Slap. On the 80-inch television. Susan collapsed to the floor, watching as the symbols of her wealth were one by one defiled by ugly red papers. All these things, bought with money saved from Ava's slave labor, things she had boasted about to her friends, reveling in her superiority. Now they were branded, seized, for debt. This is also subject to seizure. One of the men reached for the tea set on the dresser. Don't touch that! It's a limited edition! And this too. On the collection of expensive wines David had been collecting, stickers were also mercilessly applied. Wait! That's vintage. You're ruining the value. David protested, but the man ignored him. The whole house turned red. The beautiful living room that Ava had once polished every day now looked like an abandoned house covered in cursed talismans. "Ma'am, we need to inspect this room as well." A marshal headed for Susan's bedroom. There, her main treasures were stored, her collection of jewelry and handbags. "No, not in there!" She stumbled and crawled, grabbing his legs. "I beg you, have mercy. I can't live without those." The marshal looked at her with disgust. Concealing assets is a criminal offense. He pushed her away and threw open the closet. Inside, rows of Chanel, Hermes, and Louis Vuitton bags stood, with mink coats hanging among them. Among them was the same orange box Veronica had recently gifted her. "Anything of value will be seized." The marshal began to take out the items and check them against a list. "My Hermes! My Chanel!" Susan screamed as if her children were being taken from her. These weren't just things. They were her pride, proof that she was special, the armor that allowed her to look down on others. And now, that armor was being stripped from her. And this too. The marshal's hand reached for the jewelry box on the vanity. Inside sparkled large diamonds and pearl necklaces. And no! Susan went berserk and tried to bite the marshal's hand. "That's mine! I bought it! Give it back!" "Mom, stop it!" David frantically pulled her away. "Let go, David. Your wedding ring is in there. The one you were going to give back to Veronica." "Shut up!" "Enough!" David screamed through tears. "It was all a fake. Our life. Our pride. It was all a sandcastle built on Ava's suffering. No. It's not my fault. I'm the victim." Susan's hysterical scream echoed through the room. The marshals, ignoring the family drama, methodically applied the red stickers. The lid of the jewelry box slammed shut. It was sealed. At that moment, all the life seemed to drain from Susan's body. She collapsed to the floor and froze, staring into space. Tears streamed from her eyes, but there was no light in them. Her mind had broken. By evening, the marshals had left, and silence fell upon the house. But it was not the peaceful silence of before. It was the silence of death. Paul, returning home, was speechless at the sight of his house plastered with red stickers. In the middle of the living room sat his catatonic wife and David, hugging his knees. The electricity hadn't been cut off yet, but no one turned on the lights. In the dim room, the countless red papers glowed ominously. "The end," his parched voice rasped. "The company is bankrupt. The house, the furniture, everything will be auctioned off. We're penniless." "Dad, what's going to happen to us?" David asked. In a trembling voice, "We'll be evicted. We might be able to stay until they find a buyer at auction, but it's a matter of time." He sat on the cold floor, not daring to sit on the sealed sofa. They had nowhere to go. Relatives, friends, partners, everyone had turned their backs on them. Fearing the wrath of Thompson Global, no one would extend a helping hand. "It's cold," Susan whispered, as if in a daze. "Ava, bring me some hot tea." "Mom, Ava's not here anymore," David said, crying. "We kicked her out. She's never coming back. It's cold. Turn on the heat." Susan wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Not a trace of the arrogant mistress of the house remained. Only a pathetic, broken old woman. Outside, the cold rain continued to fall. The paradise they had built on lies was covered in countless red scars and was drowning in the cold rain. But their punishment was not over. After the financial collapse, a face-to-face meeting with Ava Thompson awaited them, where they would have to hear the full weight of their crime. Friday, 9:50 a.m. A damp air, after the cold rain, hung in front of the massive building of the New York County Supreme Court. The dreary winter sky was reflected in the puddles on the asphalt. A black limousine pulled up smoothly, and I stepped out. The driver, sent by my father, respectfully opened an umbrella over me. Today, I was no longer wearing the modest attire of the Smith's daughter-in-law. A custom-tailored navy blue suit, a pearl necklace around my neck. This was my true appearance, the appearance of Ava Thompson. "Miss Thompson, this way." Beside me stood the top lawyer from the holding company's legal team. I gave a short nod and, my heels clicking on the marble floor, entered the lobby. In the spacious courthouse corridor, people with different fates bustled about. In one of the waiting areas, I saw them. David, sitting on a bench, jumped up as soon as he saw me. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. His always impeccable Italian suit was rumpled. His tie was askew, his cheeks were sunken. Under his eyes were not just dark circles, but black bruises, as if he had been beaten. Could a person age so much in just a few days? Next to him sat his mother, Susan. Her transformation was even more striking. Her always coiffed curls were disheveled. Deep wrinkles lined her makeup-free face. Not a trace of the elegant lady in designer clothes remained. She wore a worn-out cardigan. She stared into space with a vacant gaze. My father-in-law, Paul, was not there. He probably couldn't even get out of bed. "Ava! Ava!" David tried to run to me, but the lawyer stepped in his path. "Please refrain from direct contact with my client." All statements threw me. "Let me through! I want to talk to my wife!" David tried to push the lawyer aside, but security immediately surrounded him, and he backed off. Our eyes met. "Ava, I'm begging you. Listen to me. I was wrong. I was an idiot." His voice trembled. "It's over with Veronica. I never needed her. I only love you, Ava." I looked down at him with a cold gaze. "Love? Which lips are saying that? The same ones that last Sunday, standing next to your mistress, threw at me, 'Get out!' and tossed the keys?" My voice was surprisingly calm. "David, if you didn't know who I really was, would you be standing here on your knees right now? What if I had remained Ava Smith, the poor orphan with no support? You'd be laughing at me with Veronica right now, wouldn't you?" David opened and closed his mouth but couldn't utter a word. Because it was the truth. His love was not directed at me, but at the label Thompson Global Heiress. "Ava!" A cry came from behind me. It was Susan. She staggered towards me and, without hesitation, collapsed to her knees in the middle of the corridor, in front of everyone. "Sweetheart, help me, Ava. Miss Thompson. I'm sorry!" She screamed without any regard for propriety. "My house! They're taking my house! The furniture, the jewelry. It's all seized. It's going to be auctioned off. We'll have nowhere to live. I don't want to go back to that old, cramped apartment. I'll die." Onlookers stopped and whispered. But she was beyond shame. All that remained in her was a pathetic desperation not to lose her current life. "I was wrong. I'm sorry I made you wash dishes. If I had known you were from such a prominent family, I never would have done that. I'll treat you like a princess. I'll serve you tea myself. Just tell your father to stop the seizure." I looked at her hands, trying to clutch my legs. The same hands that had once pushed me, ordered me around, treated me like garbage. "Susan," I said, quietly but clearly, "there's a common thread in your apologies." She raised her tear-streaked face. "You're not apologizing because you feel sorry for me. You're apologizing because you don't want to lose what you have. If I had known you were from a prominent family, I wouldn't have done that. That means if someone weak were in my place, you would do the same thing all over again, right?" Something gurgled in her throat. A flash of confusion crossed her eyes at being caught in her lie. "For 5 years, I tried to believe you were my family. I thought that no matter how much you humiliated me, one day we would understand each other. But I was wrong. You don't have hearts." I nodded to my lawyer. There was nothing more to say. Breathing the same air as them was agonizing. "Ava, wait, don't go!" David shouted again. "I don't want a divorce. We need you." "Need me. As a money bag," I thought, and threw a cold glance back. The terms of the divorce were relayed through the lawyer. I wasn't demanding alimony or a division of assets, but I wasn't paying their debts either. The $50 million debt was now their problem. Whether they ended up on the street, whether they declared bankruptcy, was for them to decide. I turned and walked towards the courtroom. Behind me, I heard Susan's desperate wail. "No! Ava! Don't leave us! We're family!" Family? I tossed the last words over my shoulder without stopping. Family? I scoffed. That dishwasher, as you called her yesterday, is gone. Standing here is Ava Thompson, who has come to reclaim the dignity you trampled for 5 years. Goodbye. You're not even strangers to me. The massive courtroom door opened before me. Behind it awaited the legal procedure that would finally sever all ties with them. In the corridor remained only Susan's sobs and David's moans. I entered and, without looking back, quietly closed the door behind me. Thud. The heavy sound cut me off from the past. I felt a great weight lift from my shoulders. It was liberation. I could finally start my life. Walking on my own 2 feet. But the story doesn't end here. Having dealt with everything, a new mission, entrusted to me by my father, and an unexpected future awaited. The wings named Thompson Global, which I had once tried to shed, I was about to reclaim. The dry crack of the judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom. The divorce is granted. The judge's impassive statement put a legal end to my 5-year life under the name Ava Smith. To my soul, that sound was one of liberation, like the sound of chains breaking. A month passed. True winter had arrived, but in my soul, it was spring. I only heard bits and pieces about the fate of the Smiths. Smith Tech, burdened with a $50 million debt, went through bankruptcy proceedings. The mansion was sold at auction for a pittance. The family, having lost everything, fell apart. They now live in a cramped, old apartment on the outskirts of Queens, surviving on odd jobs. Those who once looked down on me as the bottom were now at the bottom themselves. Fate can be cruel and surprisingly precise. But for me, this was already a story from another world. Midtown Manhattan. The headquarters of Thompson Global. The chairman's office on the top floor. For the first time in 5 years, I was walking on its thick carpet. Welcome back, Ava. My father, Robert Thompson, looked at me from behind his desk with unconcealed pride. In his eyes was not the severity of a CEO, but the tenderness of a father who had worried about his daughter all these years. For 5 years, he had watched in pain as I, stubbornly, tried to live the life of an ordinary person. Dad. Mr. Chairman. I straightened up and looked at him. I'm sorry for making you worry for so long. Because of my stubbornness, many people were hurt. What are you talking about? My father shook his head. That was your choice, and you went through those 5 years of hell without running away. That experience is a priceless treasure. He stood up and walked to the window. Below, the vast city stretched out countless buildings, scurrying cars, millions of people. Ava, now you know how helpless those who have nothing are, and how unfairly they are treated. Yes. I learned that to my very core. The humiliation of being ordered to wash dishes. The loneliness of being ignored. The pain of verbal abuse that shatters the soul. Living in an ivory tower, I would never have known this reality. Then turn that pain into strength. My father turned and handed me an appointment order. Ava Thompson, Vice President. Thompson Global. Vice President? I held my breath. My father nodded confidently. The Thompson Global of the future doesn't need a leader who judges people by numbers, but a leader who knows what pain is and can protect the dignity of every employee. You can do that. The hand holding the order trembled. Once, the name Thompson was a burden to me. I hated being seen through the prism of status, being used. I fled from that name to the Smiths. But that refuge turned out to be a real hell. I was wrong. I thought independence meant breaking the wings I was born with and crawling in the dirt. But true strength is spreading those wings and using your power to protect others. I gratefully accept this appointment. I raised my head and looked my father in the eye. In my eyes, There was no longer a shadow of that intimidated daughter-in-law. In them burned the light of a leader who had made her decision. A few days later, the large conference hall at headquarters was packed with employees and journalists, more than 2,000 people. Under the flashes of cameras, I walked to the podium, a pristine, white, perfectly tailored suit, as if washing away 5 years of humiliation. I approached the microphone, and the murmur in the hall subsided. Good afternoon. As of today, I am assuming the role of Vice President. My name is Ava Thompson. My voice, amplified by the microphone, resounded throughout the hall. My prepared speech had figures and strategic plans, but I set it aside. The words I needed to say weren't there. For the last 5 years, I have lived far from Thompson Global as an ordinary person in a corner of society. The hall buzzed. There had been many rumors about my disappearance. There, I learned that a person's value is not determined by their status or wealth, and that power and organizations, if used improperly, can easily crush the human soul. In my memory, the Smiths' living room surfaced. The days when they looked down on me, laughed at me, treated me like I was invisible. That pain will stay with me forever, but it is this scar that will now be my strength. I promise to make the Thompson Global Group an organization where no one is left behind, where no one's dignity is violated. To those who have stumbled, we will give a second chance. To those who are weak, we will extend a helping hand. In this, I see our strength. To all employees, I ask for your support. Let's build a better future together. After a moment of silence, a few scattered claps grew into a deafening ovation. Everyone stood up. In the employees' eyes was surprise and hope. They sensed that this new vice president was not just a spoiled heiress, but a comrade who knew the taste of dirt and tears. Under the thunderous applause, I bowed low. Lifting my head, I saw my father sitting in the front row. He was smiling, wiping away tears. Do you see this, Smiths? I thought, addressing my former family. Because you threw me out, I have found my purpose. Because you trampled on me, I can fly higher than ever before. Thank you, and goodbye. Descending from the podium, I felt as if I had wings. A clear blue sky stretched outside the window. This was the canvas of my new life. Now I would live under my own name, with my own strength, protecting those I love. No one would ever make me bow my head again. I, Ava Thompson, spread my wings and soared into the sky. But life is a surprising thing. I had decided to dedicate myself to work, but unexpectedly, 3 years later, true happiness came to me. Hidden behind the revenge was not emptiness, but a warm light. 3 years had passed. The sky over New York was just as high and blue. The vice president's office at Thompson Global. I signed the last document in a stack of papers and put down my pen. Excellent work, Madam Vice President, my assistant said, bringing me a cup of hot herbal tea on time. That's all for today. You have some time before your dinner engagement. Thank you. I think I'll go for a short walk. I stood up and looked out the window. The city below looked the same as it had 3 years ago, but it was changing, just like me. For these 3 years, I had run without stopping. I had proven with my actions that I wasn't just my father's daughter, successfully launching several new projects. Now, business magazines often wrote about me as one of a new generation of female leaders. Work was going well. I felt a sense of satisfaction, but not just from success. Leaving the office, I headed to a nearby park. The evening park was full of people hurrying home and the voices of children. I sat on a bench, and at that moment, a warm coat was draped over my shoulders. Sorry to keep you waiting, Ava. Turning, I saw a man with a kind smile. Andrew Scott, a college classmate, now the owner of his own architectural firm. We had met again 6 months after my appointment. No, I just got here. Finished with work? Yeah, a last-minute project, but I couldn't be late to meet you. He sat next to me and took my cold fingers in his large, warm, and steady hands. They weren't like David's. David's hands always wanted to take something. Andrew's hands protected and gave. You look a little pale. Working too hard again? He looked at me with concern. I'm fine. Just the end of the quarter, a lot to do. You're a workaholic. But please don't forget. You're not just the vice president of Thompson Global, you're my dear Ava Thompson. If anything happened to you, I couldn't bear it. His words warmed my chest. My status or money didn't matter to him. He didn't care if I was eating ramen in a t-shirt and jeans or attending a gala in an evening gown. He was the one who loved me for who I am, the one I had so desperately searched for 5 years ago. Thank you, Andrew. We walked side by side. As we left the park onto a main street, I heard shouting at the entrance of a grocery store. Hey! You gave me the wrong change! Can't you count? I'm sorry, sir. I'll check it right now. A middle-aged man was yelling at a cashier. The cashier, in a worn-out uniform with graying hair, was bowing to him. His hunched back, his frightened voice. I stopped. Could it be? Through the glass, I saw his face, sunken cheeks, weathered skin. Not a trace of his former polish remained. But it was him, David Smith. Ava, what's wrong? Andrew asked with concern. Following my gaze, I watched silently. David, at the customer's prodding, frantically pushed buttons on the cash register. His hands were shaking, the same man who once wore Italian suits and said he was one of the chosen ones. I had heard rumors. The Smith family, burdened with huge debts, had fallen apart. Susan, from the stress, had developed dementia and was now in a cheap nursing home. Paul worked as a security guard on a construction site, and David couldn't find a permanent job and was getting by with odd jobs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry! His humiliated voice reached me. These were the same apologies I once had to offer them. The pain of unjust anger, of humiliated dignity. He was now experiencing what I had experienced for 5 years. A friend? Andrew asked. I slowly shook my head. No, just a passerby. It was strange. The man I had hated so much. I looked at him and felt nothing in my chest. No anger, no sadness, not even pity, just a part of the scenery. I realized that this was the final farewell. In my soul, David Smith no longer weighed even a speck of dust. Let's go, Andrew. I squeezed his hand tighter. I'm hungry. Let's get something delicious. Of course. I just booked a table. We turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the store door open and a lifeless voice say, "Thank you for shopping with us." But I never looked back. The setting sun painted the canyon between the skyscrapers red. In this light, Andrew stopped and looked at me seriously. Ava. He took a small box out of his pocket, not a designer brand, but a warm, handmade wooden one. I've been looking for the right moment to give you this. The box opened. Inside was a simple but elegant platinum ring. It lacked the flashy luxury of diamonds, but it seemed more beautiful to me than any treasure. I can't erase your past. I can't make it so your wounds never existed. He looked me straight in the eye. But I can build a future with you. I promise you, a life where you will only cry tears of joy. Ava. Not as the vice president of Thompson Global, but as Ava, an ordinary woman. Will you let me protect you? Will you marry me? Déjà vu. I remembered David proposing to me 5 years ago. Then, I believed I would find happiness. But it was a fragile sandcastle. What was before me now was different. This was a solid house. Built on firm ground. The only place where I was accepted for who I am. Tears rolled down my cheeks. They were not tears of humiliation or pain. They were tears of sincere joy and relief. Yes, I whispered, smiling through my tears. I would love to be your wife. Andrew slipped the ring onto my ring finger. It fit perfectly. I thought I heard applause. Looking around, I saw that passers-by were smiling at us. No one knew I was a billionaire's heiress. They were simply happy for a happy couple. Thank you. Truly, thank you. I buried my face in his chest. His heart was beating strong and steady. This was the sound of life. This was the sound of happiness. 5 years ago, on the day I was forced to wash dishes, I stood at the edge of a precipice. Then, obsessed with revenge, I destroyed my enemies with a devilish look on my face. It seemed to me that all the past versions of myself were looking at me now and waving. Well done. True revenge is not to destroy your enemy, but to become so happy that they envy you, that they can't reach you, and that in the end, you forget about them. I knew that for sure now. So, shall we go? Into our future? Andrew took my hand. Let's go! I wiped away my tears and, with a radiant smile, walked forward. I vowed never to let go of the warmth of our clasped hands. The setting sun stretched our shadows, and at some point, the two shadows merged into one. The second chapter of my life was beginning here, a story full of a true, untarnished radiance.